We have reached our last step in my method for becoming more efficient at studying. We've already gone through 3 of them, so if you haven't seen them, watch the videos beforehand. This last step is about varying your question types. It's important to switch up the types of questions that you use when you're reviewing for a test, especially if your test has multiple topics on it. For example, if your test has a math section, a science section, and a social studies section, do a few questions of each within the same day. You can do 5 questions of social studies, 5 questions of science, 5 questions of math. And if you really want to challenge yourself, mix all of those up. Do them out of order. Don't fall into a pattern of doing only math questions on Monday and social studies questions on Tuesday. Doing blocks like that actually is not as effective as mixing up your questions. Studies show that when we mix up question types, we actually do better on tests. In this book, Make It Stick, which is the book that I keep referring to, it's an amazing book, it talks about a study that they did with kids. Now, these kids were divided into 2 groups. One group was told to continuously practice free throws at the free throw line. They were not allowed to go anywhere else around the gym. All they did was practice at the free throw line. The other team was allowed to practice throwing anywhere they wanted in the court. They did not have to stay at the free throw line. The test at the end of the week was to see which team could make the most free throws. You would think that the team that only practiced at the free throw line would get better at free throws and would outperform the other group. Practice as you play is what everyone tells you to do in sports, right? But that's not what happened. The students who were allowed to throw the ball anywhere they wanted to actually outperformed the other students who were only allowed to throw at the free throw line at throwing free throws. It boggles the mind. It's crazy that this was the outcome. Practice how you play does not always apply. The group of students who were allowed to throw baskets anywhere in the court were actually challenging their brains more than the students practicing at the free throw line. Their brains had to judge distance, had to judge height, had to judge angles much better and much faster than the students who were always in the same spot. And this goes to show that our brain needs challenges. Our brain is so good at recognizing patterns that it starts to fall asleep if the pattern stays the same for too long. So the kids that were throwing at the free throw line, it got a little boring. Their brains started falling asleep and they stopped making those synapses. The other kids, however, that were throwing everywhere, mixing it up, their brains had to stay active. Their brains had to learn how to adjust and how to really learn the skill of knowing how far the basket is and using hand-eye coordination. There was no time to fall asleep. This is the same thing when you're doing practice questions. You really want to mix up topics. You do not want your brain to fall asleep because all you're doing for the next hour is just math. The more you mix up your questions, the more challenge your brain has and the more active learning you're doing. What does this look like in real life? Mix up your question types. If you are using a question bank that allows you to select different question types, just mix them up. What I would do is I would pick at least 2 or 3 topics, and I would do only maybe 10 or 20 questions at a time. I would have both of those topics so that naturally the questions would be shuffled around. When you get better at studying, you can select all the topics and really shuffle things around. Now, the one thing is that when you start shuffling questions, it's going to be harder. So your brain's going to get tired. You're going to get emotionally drained. You're probably going to get a lot of the questions wrong. And again, this goes back to overcoming failure anxiety. Don't be afraid to fail. Mixing up questions makes things dramatically harder. Your brain's going to have a hard time switching subjects so fast, and you're not going to like it. You're just not going to like it. But if you stick with it, your brain will continuously build synapses and do better on the test. At the same time, we want to avoid emotional fatigue, which is a real issue. If you do feel a little depressed, if you feel a little sad while you're trying to do all of these study techniques at once, try decreasing the amount of variation. So for example, you could do maybe a chunk of 10 questions that are all the same, and then the next 10 questions mix them up. And then the next 10 questions go back to all the same, just to ease yourself into it, because it really is emotionally draining to constantly be getting all these questions wrong. When I got really fatigued and tired from doing all these crazy study techniques and I started to feel sad about my abilities and my confidence was down, I would take some time to do questions that I knew were easy for me. And that actually did the trick. I would do maybe a set of 20 questions of the ones that I found easier, score those 80s, 90s, 100s, feel better about myself, give my brain a break, and then I would go back to the hard questions, the mixed questions. And I would do that back and forth, and that helped me to maintain stamina. Because I'm telling you, these study techniques are not for the faint of heart. And so there you have it. Those are my steps towards becoming more efficient at studying. Just to recap, first one was to do questions first, always. Immediately go to the questions. Look at the questions as a study tool and not as a way to test your learning. Number two, do the hard questions first and overcome failure anxiety. The only way you're going to get better is to fail. You have to identify your weaknesses in order to overcome them. The only way you're going to identify those weaknesses is if you do hard things first. By doing hard things first, you also have more time to correct those hard things, correct those mistakes in time for the test. And don't save questions. Whatever test you're trying to save for the end, don't save it. Don't do it. Do it first. You can always repeat those questions later, and trust me, you will never run out of questions. Number three was space your questions out. Spatial repetition has been shown to help the brain make more synapses and improve your ability on tests. Space out seeing the same question over and over by at least 20 to 30 minutes. If you use flashcards, this is a good way to already do that. Sometimes it's already an option that's built into the app itself. And finally, vary your question types. Don't do just one day of cardiology, one day of pulmonology, etc., etc. To really get your brain going, to really learn faster, mix up the questions. Do cardiology, pulmonology, respiratory, and ICU all in the same question set. Mix them up and your brain will work a lot better. Now, I advise you to implement these tips slowly over time. Changing 20 years worth of how you used to study takes a toll on your emotions. As medical students, we all want to get things right all the time. When you study this way, you're going to find that you're getting a lot of things wrong, and it hurts. Make sure that you're sleeping well. Make sure that you are taking breaks. Make sure that if something is too hard and feels overwhelming and your motivation goes down, that you back it up, maybe incorporate some of your old study techniques and give yourself a bridge so you can ease into it. Do something that's easy for you for a little bit just to get your confidence back up. I definitely had to do that very often as I was getting used to this new study schedule. But if you stick to these study strategies, your scores will increase. These study strategies are tried and true. So, cheers to you and changing your study habits. I recommend it one more time that you read this book. It's a little dry, I'm not gonna lie. You might get a little bored, but if you like research, if you like proof, then this is the book for you. I wish you all good luck on your upcoming exams. Let me know if you have any ideas for my next video, and I will see you next time.